Hello crafty friends, it's Alicia aka Crafty Owl here with the video for the August 2023 Oh So Inspired collaboration hop. I hope you'll stick around to see who inspired us this month and see the card I'm going to create. Thank you so much for stopping by today. If this is your first time to my channel, I hope that by the end of this video, you'll be inspired to click on that subscribe button below and ring the bell for notifications. If you're already a subscriber and regular viewer, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here again. If you're new to my channel or the Oh So Inspired collaboration hop, this is a monthly series that I host where myself and my team of collaborators uses the same inspiration piece and creates something new based upon it. So make sure once you're done with my video today that you go see what everyone else has created. To do that, you can try the hashtag in the title, but if that's acting up, shortly after these videos go live, I will create a playlist and it's linked in that description box below. Now, if neither of those are ready, I also have a list of all the collaborators so you can go to their channels directly. I know that they're going to love for you to stop by, see how they were inspired, and leave them some love. This month, we are being inspired by Leanne West, who is at One All Girl Studio on Instagram. The card we're using is up on screen now. I think we all just fell in love with that cute little sunshine scene. And to see the original piece, make sure to check out my description box for links. Now, when I saw this card, I did pull out my Trinity Stamps new card maker sketchbook to jot down kind of what I wanted to do. The first things that stood out to me were that cute little character in place of the eye and the die cut letters. So for my card today, I'll be focusing on that. Let me know in the comment section below what would inspire you from this card. As I share the process, I will let you know about the tools and products I'm using, but as always, if I ever leave you with any questions, feel free to leave those in that comment section below. Let's get crafty! To get started, I'm going to be doing the stenciling and I'll be using pink and blue. I figure this way when those two colors mix together, they'll still make sort of a purple instead of a brown. To hold my piece of cardstock down, which I cut to 6 by 3, I put a little adhesive on the back and then place it onto my grid paper. Then to hold the stencil in place, I got a couple pieces of painter's tape, removed the tackiness on the back of my hand, and got that all adhered down. I'll start with the blue ink, and this is pretty normal. I just use my clockwise and counterclockwise motions until I have a good coverage, or what I think is on the stencil. Now for this, I did want the second pink to be in kind of different areas of confetti, so I'm going to flip it over to do that color. Since there will be some ink still on the front, I did make sure to clean that very well before I went on to the pink. When I put the stencil in place for the pink ink, I did move it down just a little bit, again, just to get a little variation in where the confetti pieces were. But then it was the same thing, I just ink blended until I had a nice saturation. And you know my favorite part is always the reveal. I did want the stenciling to bleed off the edges of this piece, so I brought in my trimmer and quickly cut it down to 2 3/4 by 5 3/4. Then, using a scrap of white cardstock, I cut a piece for the inside at 3 by 6, and then I brought in the same pink and blue as I stenciled with for some matting and the card base. Once all the cardstock pieces were ready, I went ahead and assembled the card. I put that piece of white on the inside for the personal message, and then I matted my stenciled piece with that blue mat. This just got adhered flat to the front center of the card base. Whenever I use a card base that is a dark color, I do like to add that white inside so the personal message is easy to read. The next thing I'm going to do is die cut my letters for the sentiment, and because I already have this kind of sketched out in my book, I brought that back in, and above each letter I put a color to notate the cardstock that I want to use. I want to alternate between the pink and blue, and being able to write it here made it so much easier when I went off screen to die cut the letters for happy birthday. Here's a look at those cut, and you will notice I did skip the I because later that cute little girl with the cake will be sitting in its place. And speaking of the cute little girl with the cake, it's time to get her stamped. For this, I'm going to be stamping onto a scrap of Neenah Solar White with Versafine Clair Nocturne ink. And to help me stay within the lines when I'm coloring, I am going to heat emboss it. So I got out my clear embossing powder and the powder tool that when I prep that cardstock, it keeps the powder just where I want it. I did go ahead and ink the image up and stamp it twice to get it nice and juicy for the heat embossing. Once that was done, I poured my powder over it a couple times and tapped off the excess, and then I brought in my heat tool to melt the powder. I like to start by heating up the back just a little bit, then bringing my tool to the front to melt that powder. I always love the shine on heat embossing. Now we're going to add just a little bit of color to this image. Since the eye would have been blue if I kept up the pattern for the cardstock, I am going to use a blue Spectrum Noir TriBlend marker and just color in her dress and the frosting on the cake. This is what I like to call selective or spotlight coloring, just because I don't always like to color a whole image. And since this card is just mainly pink and blue, I wanted to stick with that. Now I did decide to pull in a yellow as well, just to put a little bit of a glow on that candle. Once that coloring was finished, I brought in the coordinating die and cut her out, and isn't she so adorable? I brought back in my card, and now we're going to get those letters put on there. I did play around with the placement a little bit and figured out the background was a little too bold to put the letters directly on it. So I cut a piece of vellum that was 5 1/4 by 2 1/4, and we're going to put our letters on that. You can see here how we have the border that's more bold of the stenciling, but the letters stand out. Now to help me get those nice and straight on there, I brought back in the grid paper that I stenciled on, and I temporarily held my vellum in place with one of those pieces of painter's tape. Now when I get the adhesive added to the back, I can use the grid to help me keep that straight. For these, I am using my Barely Art liquid glue just so I have a little bit of wiggle room when I put it onto the vellum, and then I just got each of these letters placed. Because I want to pop up my image, I did just leave a space for her between the B and the R, but before we can put her on there, we need to get our vellum piece put on the card base. Once again, to do this, I'm going to use the Barely Art glue and try to hide that adhesive behind the die cut letters. After that was on the card front, I put a stamp block on it and I let it sit for about 5 minutes so everything could dry. While those letters were drying, I added some foam tape to the back of my little girl, and now we're going to get her popped up between the B and the R. At this point, I thought, you know what, she needs a little sparkle. So I brought in my sparkle pen and just went over the areas that I had colored in blue. And now to finish the card off, I did want to add a little bit more bling, so I brought in some enamel dots from Honeybee Stamps. This package has clear enamel dots and then clear glittery enamel dots. So I added 3 of the glittery ones to the card front, and here's a close-up look at that finished card. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I made today's card. If you did, as always, a thumbs up is appreciated. Now don't forget to go visit that original inspiration piece and the collaborators cards by using those links in the description box. Until my next video, I hope you're all having a crafty day. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch all the way to the end of the video. I hope now you'll consider clicking on one of the videos or playlists I have linked above. And if you are interested in any of the products or tools I used in today's video, I do have some links in the description box below.